On this episode of Clint Our Eye for the Spider Guy, Peter Parker gets a new costume. But actually, turns out the black costume is alive. It's an extraterrestrial symbiote. It gives its host new powers, but it can also change your personality. It can make you more brave or more emo. Just like my favorite real-life parasite, Toxoplasma gondii. Don't worry, it's contagious. In the weirdest way. It involves cat piss and horny rodents. We'll get to that. Peter Parker's symbiote is also contagious. It gets passed on, and that's the origin story of the villain Venom.
I have a parasite. Yeah.
In Venom Super Special #1 from 1995, it turns out that these symbiotes feed off of the adrenaline of their hosts. They force their unwilling partners to take risks so they can share the adrenaline rush. So I read that story when I was a kid, and then years later, I came across this article about motorcycle crashes. It turns out that in autopsies of dead bikers, they kept finding in their brains this one parasite, Toxoplasma gondii. This parasite is a protozoa that reproduces sexually, but it can only have sex inside the intestines of a cat. The problem with living inside cat guts is that you're going to get pooped out. Literally, you and your offspring are going to get pooped out, and somehow you've got to get back in the cat guts. So the offspring can survive in dirt or water for months, waiting to be eaten or inhaled by some other mammal. Once it's in a new host, it migrates to the brain, to the amygdala. That's the part of the brain that handles those core survival instincts like fear and also libido. So the parasite rewires the amygdala to make what used to be scary now sexually arousing. So in the rat's case, this means that when it smells cat urine, instead of running away, it goes towards it, and it's more likely to be eaten by a cat. But Toxoplasma gondii, it doesn't just infect cats and rats. It can also infect sheep and goats and pigs and people. And why not? We're all mammals. We all have an amygdala. One experiment found that people with toxoplasmosis actually thought that cat piss smelled sexy.
Panda, say I love you.
It's possible that somebody, because they were brainwashed by this parasite, became dinner for a lion. Epigeneticists have basically said that since so many of our ancestors probably had toxoplasmosis at some point, that might explain why it's so common for some people to associate violence and danger with erotic thrills. One study of thousands of Eastern Europeans found that the people with toxoplasmosis were more likely to be into BDSM. But maybe it's not the toxo, right? Maybe having a cat overlaps with BDSM for some other reason.
This could be dangerous. Peter, you didn't keep any, did you?
Peter Parker rejects the symbiote because it's been turning him into a jerk.
Doc Connors was right. The symbiote's taking control.
So it latches onto Eddie Brock, and it makes them have powers, but it also makes them less inhibited. Guess what? Toxoplasma gondii also makes people more aggressive and less inhibited. A study asked women to rate the attractiveness of a group of men, and the men that they said seemed the most confident and hot were the ones with toxoplasmosis. Studies have shown that the symptoms are a bit gendered, so toxoplasmosis can make women score higher on intelligence tests, but for men it makes them score lower. But for women, it makes them 54% more likely to commit suicide. And when they do commit suicide, it tends to be in a way that's more violent than women without toxoplasmosis. It's more common in some countries than others. For example, in the United States, it's maybe 10% of the population. In Europe, there are countries where it's as high as 90%. This one writer said that the countries with the highest level of Toxoplasma gondii tended to perform the best in the World Cup. Now, correlation does not equal causation. There could be some other factor, but still, it's kind of interesting. But as a rebuttal to that, for people of a certain blood group, toxo can actually slow their reaction times. So that's not so good for soccer. But reaction times are pretty relevant in car crashes. And it turns out that people who die in car crashes are 300% more likely to have had toxoplasmosis. A little skepticism is always warranted. There was a dissenting study, a long-term study of people in New Zealand, and it found no correlation between untimely deaths and Toxoplasma gondii. There was a little bit of an uptick in suicide, but that was within the study's margin of error. It's always good to remember that the studies that find no connection are not going to make the news. You're not going to read about that stuff. So when you do read stuff about human behavior, you should always be a little bit skeptical. But still, this is worth further study, especially since maybe a third of all humans have Toxoplasma gondii. That's a lot of people. And that also makes it really hard to tease apart the variables. And I should give you a disclaimer. I mean, I'm a guy making videos on the internet. My number one competition has to be cats.
Spider-Man does whatever a spider can.
Also, I'm allergic. Also, human behavior, it has a whole constellation of causes. It's not like we're taking identical twins in identical environments and giving one of them Toxo to see what happens. No. All that stuff about cats and rats, like that's very well established science. But the extent to which it impacts human behavior, there's plenty of debate still going on there. What's not disputed is that toxoplasmosis can be really dangerous for people with compromised immune systems. Now, humans can contract toxo from unwashed vegetables, undercooked meat, kitty litter. If a woman gets it while she's pregnant, her baby is much more likely to develop schizophrenia later in life.
I'm hearing a voice.
Eddie.
You're not real. You were just in my head.
Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please share it, like it, subscribe, comment. You can let me know if there are any characters or themes that you want me to fansplain.